Hello everyone, welcome back to our very last Fnaf Fangame tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make Foxy, the AI for Foxy in your game. And then as we do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can make your own characters and your own AI for your games. So, we're going to go ahead and start with that. So before we really get into that, let's just discuss how I go about programming things. So if I wanted to add Foxy to my game, I as a programmer need to understand how Foxy works mathematically, right? So for Foxy, we know that he's going to stay in his room when the player is looking at him, right? And we know that the less the player looks at him, the more likely he is to try to attack the player. And when he does, the player can shut the door and basically block him from ending your game. So basically, what does that look like numerically? Well, Foxy is going to have some kind of timer checking how much time has passed when the player is not looking at them. And then at the end of the timer, Foxy attacks. And then basically what we're going to do is we're going to pause this timer. This timer can pause when we are looking into Foxy's room. So basically, we're trying to understand how this is mathematically. So this here, this will be a variable. We're going to need a variable for this. That's one of these blue things. So we need a variable for Foxy to understand his timer. We're also going to want to reset the timer. So we're going to want another variable for that. And then we're also going to want basically we're going to want all of the rest of the code from the other AI because we know Foxy is going to move through the rooms and the other AI can already move through the rooms. So we're just going to have to modify their AI in order to make this one. So let's go ahead and work on that now. So as you can see here, I have already established some things in our AI. So go to the AI object, obj underscore AI, and here we have the AI data for all the rest of our enemies. So Nick, Jordan, Daisy, blah, blah, blah. Basically what I did is I copied this and created a new one. And this is enemy Pablo. Why is it called Pablo? Well, I added in a sprite for him, and I was too lazy to make something new, so I just added Pablo from Backyardigans. This is the face of horror right here. So, if we go back to our AI object, so we're going to call this enemy underscore Pablo. We're going to set up a struct. We're going to give it a name the same way that we did with all the other ones. We're also going to give it a position. This one, instead of starting in the storage room, is going to start in the cubicle 1 room. And then this one, I did something differently. There was a commenter who talked about just creating an array. So basically what this does, this creates a path for him. So he's going to start in the cubicle 1 room. Then he's going to go to the cubicle 3 room. Then he's going to go into the left hall. And then he's going to go into the office room. And he's always going to take this path. And we're going to explain how to set that up. So in order to get data from this array, we're going to have to use a variable. So I created that. So basically these two we're going to be using together. And then move alarm, this is the same that there is in every AI. Active, this is the same that's in every AI. So this is the look timer. I call it look underscore timer. And then look underscore timer max is equal to 300. So basically what this is going to do is this timer is going to increase until it reaches 300. And when it reaches 300, Pablo is going to attack. This timer is also going to be paused when we're looking into the cubicle 1 room. So I'll show you how that works later. XX, this is the same as the others. We don't really use this variable, but I didn't really feel like taking it out. dir, we don't use this variable either, but I didn't feel like taking it out. I was worried something would break. And then reset. So this here, this stores a function. So basically, a function is a little bit of code that is going to run somewhere else. And the reason I did this is that when we reset Pablo, it's not going to be the same as the other ones. We have to reset his position to the cubicle 1 room. We have to reset his look timer to 0 to make sure that he does his little loop again. And then we're going to have to reset this value, which checks where in our array Pablo is supposed to move to. So we have to reset these things. So I went ahead and did that. Now, something interesting, in Gamemaker there's something called scope. So you'd think that to change these variables, you just have to put position, look timer, point on path, because look, they're right there. But if you do this, nothing will actually happen. The game will actually break. So you have to put obj_ai dot enemy Pablo dot position. So this is called scoping, and it's really complicated, so I'm not going to go into all the details here. This is how I chose to get around the issue. There are other ways that you can solve scope problems, but we aren't going to get into that here because it's kind of like a lot of stuff. So we're just going to put this stuff here, and that'll make sure that the game works fine. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add it to our list of homunculi that we need to check. So Nick, Jordan, Daisy, and then enemy Pablo. So basically, when you create an AI, you're probably going to have to create a struct for them, and then you're going to have to add the struct to this array. All right, let's go. Let's take a break from obj_ai, and then let's go to game. So if we go here, we should be able to see in draw. All right, perfect. So if you remember, way back in the last tutorial, we set up the drawing for all the monsters here. So as we can see, we need to add in Pablo and how he's going to be drawn. So basically, for these ones, we're going to put another case Pablo, so that's Pablo's name, and then we're going to do draw sprite, and we're going to draw it just the same as the other ones, at 0 subimage, and at x and y is 0. So we're going to want to make sure that this code is in each one of these, because this whole block right here controls drawing for each room. So in each and every one of these rooms, we're going to want to draw Pablo's sprite so that the player can see them. So I went ahead and added all of that to each and every one. And yeah. And the last one is here. This is the office room. So as you can see, here he is right next to all the others. So whenever you add an AI, you're going to want to do the same thing here. All right, let's go back to obj_ai. And then let's go to steps. So this will control basically what Pablo does every second. So as we can see, here's Nick, blah, 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 Jordan, Daisy, blah, blah, blah. Perfect, Pablo. So now Pablo, basically we're going to want to check if Pablo is active, the same way that we do for all the others. And then this is what we're going to do. So increase the timer when you aren't looking into his room. So global.currentRoom stores the data of which room the player is currently looking into. So we want to make sure that that's not equal to obj_game.cubicle1room, which is where Pablo is going to start off. So for every step that Pablo is not in his cubicle 1 room, then we are going to increase the look timer. And then this show debug message will just show Pablo's timer so that we can look at it. And then what we're going to say here is if enemy Pablo look timer is more than or equal to Pablo look timer max, then we're going to increase Pablo's move alarm. Now you may remember we use this move alarm to basically move everything else in our game. So each AI has their own move alarm, and that will tell them whether to move or not. That's just the system I like doing it. You can do it other ways. but I set it up as 2 times global.aggression. So this means that he'll move, and then this will mean that depending on the amount of aggression in the game, so that you can adjust the difficulty dynamically, he moves faster or slower. Alright, so if it's time to move, then Pablo will move. So basically what we're going to do is he'll check if he's not in the left and right hall, because the code for that is a little bit different. And then if he's not, we're going to increase point on path. Now point on path is going to check our array. So when point on path is 0, we're in the cubicle 1 room. When point on path is 1, we're in the cubicle 3 room. When point on path is 2, we're in the left hall. And when point on path is 3, we're in the office room. So basically we're going to check that. And then another thing we do that will increase our position here. And then another thing we do is this here just make sure that this number isn't ever a number that it shouldn't be. So we're going to clamp this value so it's always between 0 and the size of our array. Because if we try to do like -1 here, or a number that's longer than our array length, we're going to get an error. So this here is just to prevent errors. And then this resets the move alarm. So that's exactly the same way we do all the other AI. They reset their move alarm so that they can move the next frame after another 160 delay. And then if Pablo is in the left or right hall, then Pablo enters the office. So Pablo enters the office, the game office room, and then the player loses the game. So that's how it works. And then another thing we're going to do, just for sanity's sake, is if we go to draw GUI. Now if you remember, we set up a debug thing. I don't know if you did this. You don't necessarily have to do this, but I set up this debug tool here just so that we can see. So I'm going to set debug equal to true so that this code runs again. And then I'm going to add in a new case for Pablo. And that way we'll be able to see him moving around the area, just so that we can check that everything's working good. Alright, so let's run it and let's see what we've got. Alright, so as you can see, we can see down here in the minimap that Pablo is in C1. We can also see in our output, because of our show debug message, that his timer is only on 96. So if we look away, we can see that his timer is now increasing. So that means that, okay, now he's running. Now he's going to be in the left hall, and we can hit this button. And we should see, yep, he's reset himself. And as you can see, the number is reset down there. So, alright, one thing that we didn't add before, and that's my bad, is that we have to make sure that this reset function is used when Pablo is reset. If you had just run it just with the code I gave you, you might have gotten an error, or you might have just seen, like, Pablo might not have reset. So let's go and let's use this function for its intended purpose. So if we go back to game, we're going to want to go to where, when the player hits the button, the enemy gets shocked and they're sent back. So as you can see here in the step event of our obj_game, right beneath all this like audio stuff, as you can see, so this right here sets all of the enemies to the storage room when they are zapped. So basically this resets them. However, for Pablo, we want to do something a little bit different. So what we're going to do is we're going to check if the homunculus is Pablo. Then we're going to call Pablo's function. So we're going to go obj_ai dot enemy Pablo dot reset parentheses. And that will be everything. And that should run his reset code, and that will allow him to get reset. So that's basically the last little bit of code that we need in order for this code to work. So that's all there is to it. So let's say you want to do like other things, like let's say you want to do something like the puppet, for example. Well, if you want to do the puppet, for example, then it's basically a similar deal. You could reuse a lot of Pablo's code. Basically, like something like the puppet, what you would need is you would need a button that charges up the music box. And then the same way that we have a timer that goes down, the puppet is going to have a timer that decreases. So this is a number that decreases. And then if the player pushes some button, then the timer stops decreasing for a little bit and the timer increases. And so as you can see, if you just think in terms of numbers and get a little bit creative with how the AI works, you can do a lot of really interesting stuff with your game. So I hope that kind of explained it to you, and I'm glad that you were able to get through all of my overly wordy tutorials until this point. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed these tutorials, please leave me a like. Please share a comment about how your game is doing and stuff like that. I am hoping to open up a Discord server for this channel. So if you have more questions or you want to show off what you've made, look for a link in the description and you can go ahead and talk to me more on there. So yeah, thank you so much for watching and have a lovely evening, old sport.